I was holding a casserole dish I'd spent 3 hours making. Chicken, roasted vegetables, the kind of meal you bring when you're trying, when you're hoping that maybe this time things will be different. I set it on my mother's kitchen counter, and without a word, without even looking at me, she slid it straight into the trash. The ceramic hit the bottom of the bin with a hollow thud. "We didn't invite you, you just showed up. That's always been your problem. You don't know when you're not wanted." The kitchen smelled like the pot roast she'd made for everyone else, the kind of smell that used to mean home. Now it just made my stomach turn. My younger sister was standing by the refrigerator. She pressed her lips together to hide a smile. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Not one person in that room said a single word in my defense. My mother pointed at the door. "Don't contact us again until you've figured out how to respect this family." I walked out. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit in my car for 10 minutes before I could drive. I stared at my steering wheel and told myself to breathe, and I did. Because what my mother didn't know was that in 48 hours, she'd be the one calling me, over and over again. My name is Delilah. I'm 34 years old. I'm a freelance technical writer. I know that doesn't sound exciting. I write documentation, user manuals, process guides. I sit alone at my desk most days, translating complicated systems into language that ordinary people can understand. It pays my bills. It funds my small apartment, my savings account, my quiet, steady life. Nobody in my family ever asked what I actually did. They just knew it wasn't impressive enough to mention at dinner. I grew up as the middle child in a blended family, and if you know what that means, you already understand a piece of my story. My mother remarried when I was 9. My stepfather was fine, mostly, but he came with 2 children, a son and a daughter, and from the moment they moved in, something shifted. They became the ones she always praised, the ones whose report cards went on the refrigerator, the ones who got the encouraging phone calls in the birthday dinners with the good tablecloth. I wasn't the problem child. I wasn't the rebel. I was just the one who was already there, taking up space, easy to overlook. I worked harder because of it. College on loans I'm still paying off. First real job at 22. Built everything I have from scratch, with no help, no safety net, and no applause. I wasn't the daughter they showed off at church, but I was the one quietly building something they never thought to ask about. And I want you to understand something before I keep going. I wasn't angry. I was patient. There's a difference, and that patience was about to pay off in ways I never expected. If you've ever been the one who worked in silence while someone else got all the credit, you already know this feeling. You poured everything you had into a family that treated you like a footnote, like your presence was an inconvenience and your absence would barely be noticed. If that's your story, subscribe right now because this community was made for you. Have you ever given everything to people who still made you feel like you weren't enough? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Click hype and let's go. Now, let me tell you what actually started all of this, because the kitchen scene wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment everything finally broke open. 3 weeks before my mother threw away my food and pointed me to the door, I was sitting at my desk on a Tuesday afternoon when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Renee, except it wasn't meant for me. It was a screenshot of a group message thread, and my name was all over it. Renee sent it by mistake and went silent the second she realized, but I had already read it. My mother and stepfather were updating their estate plan. That part I didn't know. What I also didn't know was that my step-siblings had been pushing hard, for months apparently, to have me removed from any inheritance entirely. The messages were casual about it, almost bored, like cutting me out was just a logistical detail they needed to finalize. I sat very still for a long time. The hum of my laptop fan was the only sound in the room. Then I picked up the phone and called my mother. I kept my voice calm. I said I'd heard there were changes being made to the estate, and I just wanted to understand what was happening. She didn't even pause. "You've always been difficult, Delilah. This is a family decision. You'll get what's fair." I asked her what fair meant. There was a long pause, the kind of pause that tells you someone is choosing their words not to protect your feelings, but to protect themselves. Honestly, you've never needed us the way they have. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I said, "Okay," and I hung up. But that wasn't even the worst part. A few days later, I found out through another cousin that my mother had been telling people, extended family, old friends, church acquaintances, that I had abandoned the family years ago, that I was the one who pulled away, that they had tried with me and it just never worked. People believed her. Of course they did. She's charming and warm to everyone outside of this house. She had an entire story built around me, and I hadn't been given a single chance to respond. There was a family gathering I wasn't told about, a cookout at my aunt's house, and at that cookout, according to two separate people who told me later, my mother described me as the ungrateful one, the distant one, the daughter who chose herself over family. 30 or 40 people heard that and nodded along. I found out sitting alone in my apartment reading a text from someone who thought I already knew. I didn't let myself fall apart. I made a cup of coffee, I opened a new document on my laptop, and I started writing things down. The first betrayal came about a week after that phone call. My stepfather turned 60 and his family threw him a big party. I'm talking decorations, catered food, a slideshow, 40-something relatives packed into a banquet room at a local restaurant. I found out because my aunt accidentally tagged me in a Facebook post, a photo of the whole family gathered around a table, laughing, glasses raised. My mother was front and center, beaming. Nobody called me. Nobody texted. Not even a heads up. I stared at that photo for a long time. There was a tightness in my chest that I recognized. I'd felt it since I was 9 years old. I closed the app and added the date and a description to my document. The second betrayal happened at my cousin's graduation lunch, which I was invited to, probably because it wasn't my mother's event to control. I sat 2 seats down from her. The food was good, the room was loud, and everything seemed fine until my cousin asked me about my work. Before I could answer, my mother looked down the table and said it loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Delilah's always been more focused on herself. That's just who she is. A few people nodded, someone laughed softly. My cousin looked at me with wide eyes, then looked away. I smiled. I picked up my fork and kept eating. Inside, I felt the familiar burn, that particular sting that comes from being reduced to a punchline in your own family. But I said nothing. I added it to my document that evening. Date, location, exact words, who was present. The third betrayal was the most calculated. My stepsister, Bria, called me on a Sunday. Her voice was warm, almost sweet. She said she'd been thinking about me and wanted to catch up. We talked for about 10 minutes about nothing much, and then, casually, like it was just conversation, she started asking questions. How was work going? Was freelancing stable? Did I own my apartment or rent? Had I invested in anything lately? I felt the shift in the conversation, like a drop in temperature. I kept my voice light and gave her nothing real, vague answers, cheerful deflections, but I was paying close attention to every single question she asked. When I hung up, I added the entire call to my document, word for word as best I could recall. They thought my silence meant I was broken. It didn't. It meant I was ready. What they didn't know was that I had been keeping receipts for a long time, not out of spite and not because I planned any of this. I keep records because that's what I do. I'm a technical writer. Documentation isn't something I have to think about. It's a reflex. I had emails going back years, voicemails I'd saved without even knowing why, screenshots of text conversations, a paper trail that told a very different story from the one my mother had been sharing at cookouts. I had also, quietly, been doing something else. 6 weeks before the kitchen scene, after I read that group message thread from Renee, I had booked an appointment with an estate attorney, not a family attorney, my own. I paid for it myself, sat across from a stranger in a small downtown office that smelled faintly of old paper and wood polish, and I asked every question I needed to ask. I learned what my rights were. I learned what the original trust said. I learned what it meant to be named in a legal document and then quietly removed from one.
I went home and opened an email I had saved from 2 years earlier. My mother had written it after a particularly hard season for the family. My stepfather's business had hit a rough patch. I had quietly sent money. Not a little, a real amount, spread over several months, because they needed it and I had it, and I thought that was what family did. In that email, my mother thanked me, specifically, warmly. She called me reliable. She said the family wouldn't have made it through that period without me. I had that email, time-stamped in my folder, sitting right next to every other piece of evidence that said I was never absent. I was never difficult. I was the one who showed up, in the ways that actually cost something. I had the proof. I just needed the right moment and the right person in the room. The right person called me on a Thursday morning, about 2 weeks after the kitchen scene. His name was Mr. Calloway. He was the attorney who had originally drafted my grandfather's estate documents years ago, before my grandfather passed. He'd been the family's legal representative for over 15 years, and then, quietly, about a year ago, my stepfather had replaced him with someone new, a younger attorney, someone who apparently had fewer questions. Mr. Calloway told me he'd been following the situation. He said he knew I was named as a beneficiary in the original trust my grandfather had set up. He said he'd seen some things in the new documents that concerned him. He wasn't dramatic about it. He was careful, measured, the kind of man who chooses every word deliberately. But the message was clear. Something wasn't right, and he thought I should know. We met twice in his office. He walked me through the original trust language paragraph by paragraph. I brought my folder. He reviewed everything without reacting much, just nodding slowly, making occasional notes on the margins. At the end of our second meeting, he looked at me across the desk and said, "You've done good work here, Delilah." That meant more than he knew. Meanwhile, my stepsister Bria posted a photo on Instagram. She was standing outside a glass office building, smiling, dressed like she was going to a business lunch. The caption said, "Protecting the family's future." She tagged my stepfather. 30 people liked it within the hour. Then, a few days later, my mother sent me a text. Short, final. "We've made our decision. Please respect it and don't contact us again." I read it twice. Then I forwarded it directly to Mr. Calloway with one line, "For your records." I didn't respond to my mother. I put my phone face down on the desk and went back to work. They thought it was over. It had barely started. The meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. The family's new attorney had arranged it to finalize the updated estate documents. All the signatures, all the formalities, one clean meeting to make it official. What my family didn't know was that Mr. Calloway had submitted a formal legal request requiring that I be present as a named beneficiary in the original trust. They couldn't block it. I arrived 20 minutes early. The conference room was quiet. It smelled like fresh coffee and carpet cleaner. I chose a seat in the middle of the table, set my folder down in front of me, and I waited. I heard them before I saw them. My mother's voice in the hallway, easy and relaxed, talking to my stepsister like they were headed to brunch. Then the door opened. My stepfather walked in first, then Bria, then my mother. She stopped moving the moment she saw me. Her face didn't just change, it rearranged itself completely. The ease dropped away, and underneath it was something sharp and unreadable. Why is she here? Mr. Calloway stood and introduced himself. He explained his role calmly. He placed the original trust documents on the table. The new attorney looked at his counterpart with a careful, neutral expression that told me he was already nervous. Nobody spoke for a moment. The clock on the wall ticked. Someone shifted in their chair. Then I opened my folder. I set the email on the table first, my mother's words, printed and time-stamped, thanking me for the money I had sent during the hard season, then the bank transfer records, then a series of text messages where my stepfather had asked for my help navigating a business loan, messages where I had given him specific financial advice that he later used, then a printed log dated and sourced of every family event I had attended, every message I had sent, every documented moment of a daughter who was supposedly absent. I kept my voice even, not angry, just clear. You told people I abandoned this family. You've been saying it for months, but I have 2 years of records that say the opposite, and so does the original trust. The room was very still. The new attorney was looking at the documents without touching them. My step-siblings exchanged a glance, quick and private, but I saw it. My mother leaned forward. That was private. Those messages were between us. I looked at her. I let a beat pass. So was what you did to me. She sat back. Mr. Calloway spoke. He outlined clearly and without emotion the discrepancies between the original trust and the new documentation. He explained what removing a named beneficiary without proper legal grounds would require. He used language that made the new attorney straighten in his chair and start writing notes. The signatures didn't happen that day. The new documents were flagged for full review. I stood when the meeting concluded. I thanked Mr. Calloway. I picked up my folder, tucked it under my arm, and walked out of that conference room. My heels were quiet on the hallway floor. I pressed the elevator button and waited. Delilah. My mother had followed me out. I turned around. I looked at her. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She had nothing. For the first time in my entire life, she had absolutely nothing to say. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Within 48 hours, my phone started ringing. My mother called 4 times, my stepfather twice. Bria sent 3 texts that shifted from confused to apologetic to something I can only describe as carefully worded. 2 aunts called. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years left a voicemail. I didn't answer right away. I sat in my apartment, in the quiet I'd built for myself, and I let the phone ring. Not because I was trying to be cruel, not to prove a point, but because it was the first time in my life that I had nothing to prove. The truth was documented. The record was clear. I didn't need to explain myself or defend myself or soften myself for anyone. I eventually called my mother back, once. The conversation was short. She didn't apologize. She talked around things, used careful language, left large gaps where honesty should have been. But her voice was different, quieter. The confidence that usually filled every word she said to me was smaller somehow, pulled in at the edges. I listened. I said very little. When we hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt settled. Like something that had been slightly off balance inside me for 25 years had finally found level ground. I'm not building my life in reaction to my family anymore. I'm not making decisions based on what they think of me, or who they say I am, or what story they're telling about me to people I'll never meet. I'm building forward now, for myself, on my own terms. My mother told me not to contact them again, and for a moment, standing in that parking lot after I walked out of her house, I believed that was the end. But silence has a way of telling the truth louder than any argument ever could. Has your family ever told a version of your story that wasn't true, made you out to be the problem, the difficult one, the one who walked away, when you were actually the one quietly holding everything together? I want to hear it. Drop your story in the comments right now. You don't have to carry that alone. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what comes next, because this community is full of people who know exactly what it feels like to be misrepresented by the people who were supposed to protect you. Every story matters here. Click hype to help this reach everyone who's been lied about by the people they loved most. Standing up inside a family system where the rules were written without you and the game was already rigged before you knew you were playing takes a completely different kind of courage than standing up to a stranger. If you've done that, or if you're still trying to find the strength to do it, subscribe and become a part of this community. We see each other here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Click hype to let this one keep going. And thank you, genuinely, for being here.